Welcome to Policy Chats, the official podcast of the UC Riverside School of Public Policy. I'm your host, Dori Pham. Join me and my fellow public policy classmates as we explore potential policy solutions for today's most pressing societal challenges. Welcome back to Policy Chats. This episode is especially meaningful to me because it will be my last episode as podcast host. And in many ways, it feels like a full circle moment for me as a Vietnamese international student interviewing US Ambassador to Vietnam. Today, I am truly honored to be joined by Ambassador Ted Osius, often known as the bicycle diplomat and widely recognized as one of America's modern ambassadors to Vietnam. Ambassador Osius served as the United States ambassador to Vietnam from 2014 to 2017 and was among one of the first US diplomats to work in Vietnam after the normalization of diplomatic relations. He is also the author of the book Nothing is Impossible: America's Reconciliation with Vietnam, a powerful book that tells the story of how former adversaries became partners through diplomacy, courage, trust, and people to people connection. Ambassador Osius, thank you so much for joining us today.
Dori, it's a pleasure. And I didn't realize it was your last podcast, but I do hope it's a meaningful one for you. I'm very grateful that you mentioned my book. We will cover some of the ground that I cover in my book today, I hope. But thank you very much for hosting me.
Of course, it's my honor. So to start off, let's dive straight into the first question. So in your book, Nothing is Impossible, you describe reconciliation as something built through many small acts of trust over time. Looking at US and Vietnam relations today, what part of trust still needs more and most attention?
Thank you. The thesis of the book is that if you show respect, you can build trust. And if you do things together, you will build more trust, and that leads to partnership. So that's the basic idea. And I do think we're building a powerful partnership with Vietnam, but it is based on trust. And the one area that right now worries me the most with regard to trust is trade. You you kind of have to keep, if you want to build trust, you have to keep your word. And we had, up till recently, it's been very clear that Vietnam's prosperity was in our interest. Its prosperity, its independence, its national sovereignty was in the interest of the United States. That prosperity, in part, depends on Vietnam's ability to trade with us. About a third of Vietnam's exports go to the United States. But recently, the U.S. administration has pursued some pretty aggressive policies with regard to trade with Vietnam, and has launched an investigation on IPR practices, and has listed Vietnam among 60 countries that are considered to be violating fair labor practices. Um, I'm not so sure that these policies are serious, that they're seriously going after IPR or seriously going after forced labor. Instead, I think they reflect the president's love of tariffs. He thinks tariffs are great, and the Supreme Court denied him the ability to impose tariffs at will last February. So he's using whatever law would conveniently allow him to pile on tariffs. And so the laws with regard to forced labor and this investigation under IPR aren't the serious diplomacy that you'd engage in if you really wanted to change intellectual property practices or labor practices in Vietnam. Bill Burns uses a term with regard to the administration's diplomacy in Iran. He says it's drive-by. diplomacy rather than serious diplomacy. And I would say that trade policy is also kind of drive-by diplomacy instead of serious. So I think you challenge trust when you don't keep your word. And right now, America's trade policy is threatening the trust that was built between our countries really over the last 50 years. It was hard to build it. It's much easier to break it down, and I'm afraid I'm seeing some of that now in America's trade policies.
Yeah, that's so sad to hear that, the things that your successor and predecessor have worked so hard for, and now it has been tearing down, for
I
a lack
mean,
of a better
it's
word.
not over. The
Yeah,
relationship is still strong,
yeah.
and American businesses are investing here, and the private sector engagement here is deep and strong. It's not going to go away, but uh, I think trust is built on across a spectrum of activities. And what's really important to the Vietnamese right now is development. And if we threaten that, if we challenge that, we are challenging the trust that we built up.
Mm, I see. Um, so to transition a little bit, um, the term bamboo diplomacy, emphasized
Yes.
by former General Secretary Nguyen Phu Trọng, describes Vietnam's foreign policy as a flexible, resilient, and deeply rooted in national independence. From your perspective, how has Vietnam used this approach to preserve its autonomy while engaging major powers such as the United States, China, Japan, and other countries?
Yes, and I actually I don't know if the term is still in fashion, the term bamboo diplomacy, but I really like it. It's very Vietnamese. If you think about it, bamboo grows all over Vietnam. It has very strong roots, solid stem, and very flexible branches. That's kind of an apt description for Vietnam's diplomacy, strongly rooted but with flexibility built in. If you're a middle-sized power like Vietnam, you've got to deal nimbly, flexibly with China, with which you have a 1,200-mile border on the north, and with the United States across the ocean, with Europe, with the rest of Asia. This requires some flexibility and agility. And Vietnam, by the way, has 17 free trade agreements. They're in all directions. They're with Northeast Europe, with ASEAN, with Northeast Asia, with Europe. They're in multi-directional trade, which is part of its multi-directional flexible diplomacy, I think. But you asked about how does this work when it comes to the great powers? Well, if you're a Politburo leader who knows what he or she is doing, you make sure that you're looking in multiple directions at the same time. And for example, before Nguyen Phu Trong came to the United States as guest of Barack Obama in 2016 when I was ambassador, he made a trip to Beijing. He didn't want to surprise the Chinese that this overture and deepening of our partnership was about to happen. He thought the best practice was no surprise. Let's be pretty transparent. And that has been typically what has happened. These big visits have required a fair amount of preparation, and they've required alerting the neighbors, making sure there are no big surprises. So before Joe Biden came in 2023 to engineer a double upgrade of the comprehensive partnership to a comprehensive strategic partnership, which is a term of art in Vietnam. The Chinese sent a very high-level envoy to speak with Chom. Chom was pretty ill at the time, so he didn't fly to Beijing. they sent someone senior to talk to him, I'm sure at his request. And I think you've seen To Lam, the new Secretary General and President. He's been very active in multiple directions. He's made trips to China. He's gone to Russia. In fact, Vietnam in 2023 hosted Vladimir Putin, Joe Biden, and Xi Jinping, all in the course of about 14 months. I mean, that's pretty impressive, and that is definitely nimble. And I think that sort of nimble approach continues with the current General Secretary, Mr. To Lam.
Yeah, it's super interesting that you mentioned our current General Secretary and President Tolam. Um, and he has when he became General Secretary and President, there was a lot of focus on foreign relations.
Yes,
And like you said, over the past year, Vietnam has upgraded and strengthened its ties with foreign important partners such as France, Malaysia, New Zealand, Indonesia, United Kingdom, the EU,
yes.
and these developments,
Norway, interestingly, and I
yeah,
point it out because, you know, visiting a NATO country, there's a lot of subtlety in Vietnam's diplomatic moves, and Mr. Tolam is a I think a very thoughtful leader. Very sophisticated, um, very considered about his moves. He just gave the keynote speech at the Shangri-La Dialogue in Singapore, and it's a very thoughtful speech. It's Vietnam, a middle-sized power, is playing quite an important role in this region.
yeah. Um, and so, these developments, these new partnerships seem to reinforce Vietnam's image as a country seeking strategic balance,
Yes,
independence, and a wider global engagement.
yes,
So
I think that's exactly right.
yeah. So how do you understand this new phase of Vietnamese diplomacy, and how should the United States respond to Vietnam's growing international role on the international playing field?
Well, there's nothing in that that's anything but good for the United States. I mean, I think it's these are positive developments for the United States. The United States has long supported a strong, prosperous, and independent Vietnam. That's been really the leitmotif certainly since my predecessor was ambassador, and now we're about to welcome the ninth U.S. ambassador. My predecessor was the fifth. So consistently, we have welcomed this, Vietnam's strength, its independence, and its sophisticated diplomacy. It really does have Vietnam really has a lot of strategic thinkers providing leadership and excellent diplomats managing a very complicated world about as well as a middle-sized power could possibly do. We when Nguyen Phu Trong visited Washington, a very important decision was made, and that was President Obama said, "We will respect different political systems." In other words, we're not gonna try to undermine you with a color revolution. Your political system isn't the same as ours, but we can find common ground, even though we have two quite different systems. And I think that continues to be the approach. We're looking for uh, if when we think about the rise of China, it's very important that the United States has friends and allies in the region to be able to deal with China's rise. And Vietnam is not going to be an ally, certainly not in my lifetime, and probably maybe never. But it it can be a strong friend, and it's a an independent, powerful country on the border of the South China Sea, long, long coastline on the South China Sea. Um, Actually, quite in many ways, quite aligned with the views of the Philippines, one of our allies, with regard to the South China Sea and its importance. So it's what is happening now with Vietnam growing more confident is all good for the United States, in my view.
And I just want to circle back to the phrase you use and your predecessor used, a strong purpose and independent
Prosperous.
Vietnam. So
Yes.
back in 2024, I gotten a chance to speak with your predecessor, Ambassador Shear. Um,
Yes.
and he also told me the same phrase. And
Yep.
if you don't
He,
mind, can you tell us what that phrase means?
well, I thought it was very important. He looked out for me. He was my predecessor. He spent a lot of time helping me get ready for the job. And one of the things he told me was, we have developed this kind of leitmotif, this phrase used by Secretary Kerry, and that Ambassador Scheer had used. The United States supports a strong, prosperous, independent Vietnam, and one that respects human rights and the rule of law. That is seen to be an important Vietnam. Such a Vietnam is seen to be an important partner for the United States. And so I actually said these words when I was sworn in because I wanted to signal right away to the Vietnamese, this approach continues. Doesn't matter if ambassadors change. Our policy is consistent. And I believe that it continues to be our policy, that support for a strong, prosperous, and independent Vietnam that respects human rights and the rule of law. And I think consistency does matter in diplomacy. It matters when you want to build trust with a partner in a growing partnership. And so I wanted to provide to build on the trust that my predecessors had built in the decades before I became ambassador.
And it's interesting how you mentioned um, you need to keep diplomacy consistent. And I know that you, during your time as ambassador, you often carry a note card um, that you will show to the Politburo.
Yes,
And I was super curious. What
I actually have one.
that's that's amazing.
Yeah, I keep it in my. You're talking about this card, right?
Exactly, that one.
Yeah, it fits in my shirt pocket right there.
Yep.
It's a small card, but it's
Hmm.
it's kind of small but mighty. It's got two sides, and one lists prisoners of conscience. And it's not a really long list. It was kind of the top priority prisoners of conscience that we thought did not need to be imprisoned. And then on the other side, it focuses on policy reforms that would bring Vietnam's legal system in line with its 2013 constitution. Vietnam's constitution is very progressive. It leans into religious freedom, freedom of expression. Um, it commits Vietnam to respect for human rights and the rule of law, and it discusses Vietnam's adherence to international norms when it comes to human rights. So I always carried this, and I asked my whole team to carry this. I said, I'm not the only human rights officer here. We are all human rights officers in this embassy. And I wanted everybody to know what was on it. And I could tell you, all of my interlocutors, the Vietnamese officials, all knew what was on this card. And I thought clarity is the best way. If you want to lay out what it is that you're trying to accomplish, be clear about it and be consistent about it. Now, we actually made quite a lot of progress during the time I was ambassador. I think until about 2016, the number of political prisoners was steadily falling. and we were able to argue for the release of some, and successfully argue for their release. And it was no longer what I didn't like was that there had been kind of a pattern of there'd be a big visit, and the Vietnamese would release a political prisoner who would show up at Dulles Airport and give a press conference. And then someone else would get thrown in prison right behind him. And I thought this is not a healthy pattern. We've got to find a way to break this. And so that's why I really emphasized the the legal reforms that we thought would be uh, clearly aligned with Vietnam's own aspirations, not just the United States imposing our values on somebody else, but these were Vietnam's expressed aspirations in its constitution. And we made really, I thought, tremendous progress. There was the release of a law on religion and belief that was it was terrific. It wasn't maybe not 100% of what we'd hoped for, but it really the space for religious activity had grown tremendously. The civil code didn't go as far as we'd hoped it would, and the penal code didn't go as far as we'd hoped it would. But we had very vibrant dialogues, very productive dialogues, and we brought in experts who, were able to advise on the drafting of new laws, um, and we were in this together. It felt like a real partnership. Things changed in 2016, and the trends were not as good after that, and for a variety of reasons. And then the United States withdrew from the Trans-Pacific Partnership trade agreement, which I thought was a colossal blunder. As part of the Trans-Pacific Partnership trade agreement, we had negotiated the strongest human rights agreement ever with Vietnam. It was a focus on labor and ability of labor unions to associate freely. And we threw that away when we threw away the Trans-Pacific Partnership trade agreement. And in during President Trump's first term, we clearly didn't emphasize human rights to the same extent that we had before. And so I think that both what was happening internally in Vietnam and what was happening in relations with the United States contributed to a deterioration in when it came to human rights in Vietnam.
Yeah,
The
sorry.
important thing to keep in mind is that in the long term, the the approach to human rights has made a huge difference. Vietnam, in the long term, has gone from a society that was fairly closed and repressive to one that's very open. And okay, freedom of expression, we might not feel that the press is quite as free as we'd like, but freedom of expression here is much greater than it was. And a lot of that is because of Vietnamese access to the internet, and everybody's online here. They have access to the world's information. And so, um, and the approach that Vietnam has taken to the internet is, well, let's stay open. It's not like that of some of its neighbors, which have walled things off. Let's stay open. Let's be engaged in the world, and let's learn from the innovations that are happening elsewhere in the world. There has been a policy of openness in this country since 1986, 40 years of leaders choosing openness over closing off. And that has led to greater freedom of expression and greater respect for human rights. But it has not been a smooth ride.
Yeah, and I know you worked so hard to achieve that Trans-Pacific agreement.
Yes.
And now, you know, it has
Yeah, we
all
lost
gone
it,
away.
and we lost a lot when we lost it. It was a strategic blunder
Hmm.
to exit, and it will harm us in the long run. It will harm America's interests for many, many years to come.
Yeah. I kind of want to shift the conversation to a more, you know, current situation.
Okay.
Um, so recently, under General Secretary and President Tô Lâm, Vietnam has not only expanded its foreign relations, but also major domestic reforms, including the restructuring of Vietnam's administrative map from 63 provincial level units to 34,
That's right.
and the move towards a more streamlined two-tier local government system.
Yes.
This is one of, like, in my opinion, the boldest governance reform in Vietnam's modern history.
Yes.
And it suggests a leadership style that focused not only on diplomacy, but also state capacity, efficiency, and long-term national competitiveness. What does
Yes.
this review about Vietnam's current leadership, and how should the United States understand the connection between Vietnam's internal reforms and its growing global role?
So you accurately described what I consider a big bet on reform. The Vietnamese not only slimmed down the number of provinces and took out a layer and laid off 150,000 people, it's an intelligent doge, by contrast, but they also slimmed down the number of ministries. They're making the bureaucracy more nimble and more responsive to the needs of investors, partners, local business, and foreign business. And because they've decided Vietnam needs to uh, get rich before it gets old. In other words, there's a middle income trap that many countries get caught in, where they get old before they get wealthy. And uh, there are many, many examples all over the world of countries that have been caught in this middle income trap. Vietnam wants to go through it, take advantage of the demographic dividend that it has now. The average age is 32. Women are highest, like in the whole, almost in the world, the highest percentage of women in the workforce, motivated, young, literate, skilled population. And they want to take full advantage of that and jump through the middle income trap to high income status by 2045. Now, that requires a great deal of hard work. You can't get from where Vietnam is now to high income status in 20 years without a lot of hard work. But the big bet that you describe, bureaucratic reform, I think is tremendously important. It's fundamental in this effort to jump to high income status. I think there's some challenges that Vietnam faces that are real that we'll have to overcome in order to reach that goal. But there are also some tremendous advantages that it has. Its growth has been phenomenal, higher than 6% year on year, now higher than 8%, aiming for double-digit growth. So there's been consistent, fast growth. It's a stable country, politically stable. It's neutral, trades with everybody, works with everybody, has a neutral trade policy and neutral foreign policy. And that's attractive to investors. Vietnam is going to have to grow its investment it's going to have to double the level of investment it's been receiving in past years, in future years to achieve its very ambitious goals. But this hardworking, skilled, literate population is spread out in this long country, particularly in four urban centers. When you look at the other Asian tigers, Singapore, Korea, Taiwan, each one of them had one urban center.
Mm.
Vietnam has four. It has Ho Chi Minh City, Da Nang, Hanoi, and Haiphong, each of which is near a major deep water international port, uh, close to the sea, and this is the South China Sea or the East Sea, through which half of the world's, or at least a third of the world's traffic passes. Tremendously busy, productive trade corridor. And Vietnam has this network of trading relationships. So, and it has a now a new policy that really, really emphasizes innovation, the importance of science and technology, of the digital economy, and innovation for driving growth. And this is a country led by the Communist Party, but this is a party that passed a resolution that says the private sector will drive the economy. That's Resolution 68. Very, very interesting that Vietnam has taken this decision to lean all in on the private sector. And I think this combination of pro innovation, pro private sector, pro growth policies is going to help Vietnam get to that high income status and maintain high level of growth for the next 20 years. I believe this so strongly that my husband and I have actually invested in Vietnam in a fund called 20 and 20 because we believe it's going to be in the top 20 economies in 20 years. So we're putting our money where our mouth is, and it's one of the reasons that we're here and we're raising our kids here. We believe that this country has a very, very positive future and is hell bent on making a high income status in 20 years.
Yeah, that is amazing to hear that you and your husband are investing in Vietnam, raising your kids in Vietnam, and staying in Vietnam.
Yeah, we love it here.
That's awesome. And I wanna talk a bit about, you know, you said Vietnam are developing and expanding into areas such as technology, semiconductors, and clean energy.
Yes,
Um, One example that I can think of that is most recent. There was a congressional engagement with Vietnam's high tech and robotic sectors, and it shows that the comprehensive strategic partnership can support innovation ecosystems that benefit both countries.
yes,
Vietnam is no longer seen through the lens of a post-war recovery country, but it is increasingly stepping onto the global stage as a technology and economic partner. How should the
yes.
United States, yeah, understand Vietnam's growing role in this emerging industries, and what opportunities do you see for like a deeper connection there?
Well, again, I think these are developments that are very beneficial to the United States and to U.S. industry. So if you're an investor, what do you want? You want growth. Vietnam has growth. You want stability. Vietnam has stability, and you want neutrality. You want to invest in a place where there are the diversity of trading options. And Vietnam has all of those. It has some challenges in this area that you described, that's fast-growing technology. It had logistics costs are high, but I think steps are being taken to seriously address that with the development of high-speed rail, brand new airport in Long Tan near here. It's going to rival Changi and Singapore. Major efforts being made to upgrade international ports, all of its international ports, and investment is flowing into those ports. And then another obstacle is that the higher education system isn't yet up to the challenge of producing waves of innovators in this country. But I think that is also changing. It's changing rapidly. And this is the space I'm working in now, higher education. And I see tremendous movement in this area towards a higher education system that really will produce innovators, that graduate people who are looking over the horizon at what's coming next. So
Yeah,
I think the the possibility exists. And I think nothing is impossible. The possibility exists to get where where Vietnam wants to go, but it will require faith in the growth of this high tech sector. If you're Vietnam, you've grown a lot of the growth to date has been low value added manufacturing. And that was great for the past 30 years. And that boosted Vietnam to middle income status. And it, boosted the GDP per capita, boosted educational output, health output, you name it. There's been tremendous progress from the time I first came here 30 years ago when half the country lived on $1 a day or less, to now with a per capita income of $5,000 and growing. And, tremendous benefits from that low value added manufacturing effort. But the Vietnamese leaders know you can't get to high income status by producing just low value added goods. You have to move up the value chain, and that means tech. And so, fortunately, tech companies, including many that I worked with when I was president and CEO of the U.S. ASEAN Business Council, tech companies like Google and Apple, Amazon, NVIDIA, they are all here. IBM, Intel's been here for decades, producing. They've been testing and packaging their chips in one of the largest facilities they have in the world, just outside of Ho Chi Minh City. What now has to happen is the Vietnamese also have to do the R&D and design work for semiconductors. So they have to move forward in each of these areas where they've already been doing something to move to higher value added. And I think that's going to happen, but the comprehensive strategic partnership helps because in it is a commitment to training additional 50,000 engineers, 5,000 AI experts. I actually think the number probably has to be higher than that. And there's tremendous talent here in artificial intelligence, but there also has to be a commitment to doing research and engaging in biotech, and that's there, and in quantum mechanics, quantum computing, and all of that is underway, but it's nascent and it needs to be accelerated. And I think the leadership is quite committed to accelerating it, and it will involve foreign partners. When Tolam made his first trip to New York as general secretary, he met with a group at Columbia University just before he gave a major speech there. He met with a group of investors, of leaders in tech, and of leading academics doing research in areas of interest to Vietnam. And they said, we want to help you find the niche where Vietnam can really excel when it comes to high tech. And he said, we'll do it fast. We've got a party congress coming up. I need your input fast. And what was clear to me is that he wants partnership with the private sector and with academic institutions. And he'd prefer the United States if he can get it. If he can have those partnerships with the United States, he'd like that. And but if he has to go elsewhere, if Vietnam has to go elsewhere to find those partnerships, it will do so. I think it's in the interest of the United States to have those partnerships. Um, and there's leadership here that is not in hock to the Chinese, that is committed to Vietnam's independence and won't be ruled, dictated to by any other country, certainly not China. And so it's in our interest to have these partnerships, to develop these private sector and research partnerships that will benefit both countries.
Yeah, I think I completely agree on what you said what you said. You know, improving an economy also includes improving the education. Um,
Yes.
one notable example of this is Ireland. It was the poorest country in the EU, but it has invested in the education system, and now it
Yes.
produces the most high paying workers in the EU.
That's right. And it escaped the middle income trap.
Exactly.
It's a good
Yeah.
model in multiple areas. You might not think of Ireland as a model for Vietnam, but Ireland and some of the Baltic countries have
Mm-hmm.
done amazing things when it's come to leaping out of middle income status to high
Yep.
income status. And education, you are 100% right. Education's the key.
Yes. And so for like the past decade, Vietnamese students have been going abroad to study. One
Yes.
notable example is me. I'm an international
Yes.
Vietnamese student, and we are learning things from uh, already developed countries, and such as like the US, Australia, the EU. And so it's really like Vietnam is really moving in a um, upward trajectory where it is growing on the sectors like you mentioned, quantum mechanics and tech and AI and all that good stuff. Um, I guess my question to you is, um, recently, well, not recently, but last year, President and General Secretary Tolam has made secondary education free for all Vietnamese. What what do you think about that move?
Well, I think that's great. I mean, this is already a society that really intensely values education. In the middle of Hanoi, Hanoi has been capital of for 1,000 years. How many countries have 1,000-year-old capital? Well, smack in the middle of it is a very big space for the Temple of Literature. The Temple of Literature has been there for 1,000 years, and it's kind of like Oxford University in the Middle Ages. It's this center, it's this place of learning. It's peaceful, it's beautiful. I have brought many international visitors there, including U.S. presidents, because it's so important to understand that this is at the core this commitment to learning. It's a Confucian ideal. It's central to what it is to be Vietnamese, this importance of learning, and there is a embodiment of it. The 1,000-year-old Temple of Literature in the middle of the capital. But what Tolam has also encouraged, and leaders before him have encouraged, is students going abroad to get a university degree elsewhere, to bring back that knowledge that Vietnam needs. And he's really strongly encouraged the diaspora, come back. There's a good story here. You can be part of Vietnam's success going forward. Uh, so I think that's been a powerful message. Every person of Vietnamese origin is welcome to come back here, and you'll succeed, and you'll be welcomed with open arms. But the number of students who've gone overseas, that actually, uh, Ambassador number four, remember I was Ambassador number six. Ambassador number four, Mike Mahalik, nearly tripled the number of students, or the number of students going to the United States nearly tripled during his tenure. And I think by the time I was ambassador, we passed 50,000 Vietnamese students a year going to the United States, secondary
Wow.
students, undergrads, and grad students. And that is great for the US economy. Just thinking selfishly, it's great. Every student brings value to the United States, paying tuition, families coming for graduation, tourism. It's really beneficial to the United States economy. And it's really beneficial to the diplomatic relationship because nobody understands the two countries better than students who might have lived in both countries. It's beneficial in every way to have that flow of students. That has been choked somewhat. The U.S. administration now has been much less hospitable towards those who are seeking visas to come to the United States. and study. And I've heard of senior officials say, well, we don't care about foreign students. Well, that is so short-sighted. It's not thinking ahead about what's in America's interest. This is the fastest growing part of the world by a long shot. South and Southeast Asia are growing so fast, and we need to be part of that story. And we need to understand each other. And that means investing in education above all. And it's good for our economy. It's good for our own universities to thrive. It's good for American innovation. It's good in every way. But those who are afraid to have students come in because they might look different from me, or have different traditions or different languages, that is baseless fear. And you're in a vibrant student environment. Isn't it made better by the fact that people come from all over the place?
Um,
And more fundamentally, isn't America made great and greater by the fact that people come from everywhere? That's what I believe. I think what really makes America great is that we come from everywhere. And I want to see that continue to happen in our universities. In we don't want to be one of those countries that fails because the demographics plateau and there's no fresh blood coming in. People who come into the United States are people who have energy and drive. People who send their kids to the study in the United States are those who have big ambitions for the future and energy and an innovative drive. That's good for us, and I think it's good for Vietnam. I think that student exchange has been really good for Vietnam, and I hope it continues to be good for Vietnam.
Yeah, one of the notable examples of a foreign student pursuing education here is our current Secretary of Foreign Affairs, Lê Hoài Trung. He studied
Yes,
in Tufts University, so a really
yes.
good institution too.
And he's a brilliant diplomat. So I've known him for more than 20 years. And well, he's a super nice guy, but he's a brilliant, sophisticated diplomat, trusted by one general secretary after another. He had the top party job when it came to uh, foreign affairs,
Yeah.
and now he's the foreign minister. But he's trusted. He's on the Politburo. He knows the United States really well. I mean, he's one of the finest diplomats I have ever met in my life, and the fact that he's studying the United States makes me so proud. I mean, that's a good
Yeah,
investment by us in our
exactly.
future.
Hmm.
And one of his predecessors, Pham Binh Minh, he studied at Fletcher,
Yeah.
and then became foreign minister, deputy prime minister. You see people throughout leadership who studied in the United States, and boy, was that a good investment. Was that a wise investment for us to make and for their families, by the way, to be brave enough to send their kids to the United States? Because back then, when Lei Hoai Chung went, it wasn't necessarily something you could brag about, because there was still a lot of mistrust between our countries. When Pham Binh Minh
Yes.
went to the United States, he couldn't go out and say, I'm a U.S. alumnus with great confidence. Then later on, that society changed and caught up, and now it's very popular. If you have a U.S. degree, it makes your earning power higher. So it's a really good thing. But it wasn't always. And these folks who went at the beginning of the relationship, when we first normalized relations, they had guts. They had courage. Their families had courage.
Yeah. And it's a win-win scenario, you know.
Yes.
Um, the US investing in education for these high-ranking officials, and also these high-ranking officials learning from the United States also and its
Yeah.
diplomacy.
It's good in every way, in my
Yep.
opinion.
So to change topics a bit, Let's talk about military cooperation.
Okay.
So back in 2024, the US Air Force delivered the first T-6C Texan 2 training aircraft to Vietnam as part of a broader foreign military sales program. There are also have been reports about discussions over the C-130 Hercules military transport aircraft that will be sold to Vietnam. So, how should we understand these developments in the broader context of US Vietnam relationships and security cooperation, especially given Vietnamese careful approach to military alignment?
Well, I've worked on these issues for a very long time now. First as a diplomat and then as president and CEO of the U.S. ASEAN Business Council. And I worked a lot with companies like Boeing that were bringing products to Vietnam, Lockheed, many others. Um, there's a long story that led up to this. It's all about building trust, and what we talked about at the beginning of this discussion. The United States uh, first contributed some metal sharks, which are fast patrol boats, to the
Mm-hmm.
U.S. Coast Guard back when I was I mean, sorry, to the Vietnamese Coast Guard when I was ambassador. And we contributed a maintenance facility for those metal sharks. So I bet they're still in use in Vietnam's coastal waters. And then we contributed what's called excess defense articles, some Coast Guard cutters.
Yep.
I believe now it's three Coast Guard cutters that were donated, and we did the training, taught the new crews how to use the ship, how to maintain it, engaged with maintenance facilities in Vietnam so that those Coast Guard cutters, which are the largest ships in Vietnam's fleet now, would be maximally useful for the longest period of time. And the other thing we did was we listened to the needs and the concerns of Vietnam's military. I worked with a general who was vice defense minister,
Mm.
Nguyen Chi Vinh, a,
Yeah.
uh, a national hero.
Yes.
He was a tremendous counterpart, a man of incredible integrity and ability. His father was also a national hero. Well,
Yep.
we got to be good friends. And I'm joking up a little bit because we lost him not long ago, and he was someone I really respected, and he made it very clear every time he met me, we have to address honestly the legacies of war. We have to address honestly uh, what happened in the past if we want to have a different future. And so together we worked on dioxin cleanup. Now,
Mm.
dioxin is what's left over when Agent Orange has been used or sprayed. And as we know in the United States, dioxin has terrible impacts on human health, leaves people with birth defects. Once dioxin enters the system, it has been shown that to the second, third, and even fourth generation, those effects are still felt. So it's a condemnation not of only of death, but of the death of your your future.
Yeah.
Um, and so we worked very hard on this issue of cleaning up the remnants of dioxin that had been left in Vietnam. And this was after my predecessors had worked very hard to make sure we'd cleaned up unexploded ordnance, especially in the center of the country, what former DMZ, and and accounted in the most comprehensive way in human history for those who'd been lost to the war, first on the American side, and then we started to help the Vietnamese by providing information about
Mm.
those who'd been lost on the Vietnamese side.
Mm-hmm.
So this is all kind of a series of, I think, confidence building activities that establish trust between our defense establishments. I mean, you can imagine the people who were most suspicious when I first came here 30 years ago were those who'd been at war with us. Kind of naturally, that we'd been their adversaries. And so the Ministry of National Defense, I found, was the hardest ministry with which to build confidence. So we had to go slowly and carefully, but we made progress, and it's been, progress over decades, but it has accelerated in recent times. And one of the things that accelerated it was not what we did, but what happened when Russia invaded Ukraine. The
Mm.
Russians had been the big suppliers of materiel to the Vietnamese military for a long, long time, established relationships, you know, I suppose special discounts given, special bribes made, but the Russians were providing more than 90% of Vietnam's military equipment.
Yep.
And with the war in Ukraine, Russia doesn't have spare parts for Vietnam. Russia is not a reliable supplier anymore, and the Vietnamese have made that clear even publicly.
Mm.
So they need reliable suppliers. They got to defend their territory, and
Yeah.
they've defend their sovereignty, especially in the EC. And so they're not going to depend on the Chinese for their uh, military equipment. But now they are been looking very seriously at what they can obtain from us, which has the
Mm.
benefit of providing interoperability. Now that our militaries know each other well, and Vietnam's military does more with the U.S. military than with any other military on the planet.
Yeah.
But
Like
they've
that
also
defense itself.
received, support from South Korea
Mm-hmm.
and from Japan, both our allies,
Yep.
from Europeans. So they're looking in multiple directions, as they are with their diplomacy. They're looking in multiple directions to address their defense needs, and they're doing it in a thoughtful way. Uh,
Yeah.
Gone are the days when like they used to buy Russian subs. They were very
Yes.
expensive, $1 billion each for the Russian Kilo class submarines.
Yep.
The Russians would give them sell them the subs, very expensive, and then give them manuals in Cyrillic and no training, nothing on maintenance, nothing. They had to go to India to get trained on how to use the Kilo class subs,
Mm.
and that was not a good arrangement. And it's not how we operate. We're like a life cycle provider. So even
Mm.
though we may not always provide the lowest cost material, we support anything that we provide for the duration of its life. That's why I keep emphasizing something as boring as maintenance, because it
Mm-hmm.
matters in the long run. Are you going to be able to get the spare parts? Are you going to be able to take care of things as they deteriorate? And then now they are quite interested in uh, the various kinds of drones, not just aerial drones, but there are U.S. companies
Naval
that
drones.
sell sailing drones
Yeah.
that sail in the sea, that can be at sea for a year at a time. They don't have any crew. They're unmanned. They use the wind to move,
Yep.
and they beam back information that would be really hard to get otherwise about what's happening on the water. So Vietnam has a better gives Vietnam a better uh, um, ability to be aware of its maritime domain.
Mm.
Uh, and I think that's been the kind of the missing piece for the Vietnamese is you don't want to rely just on fishermen to know what's happening in the EC. You want to have a systematic way of scanning the horizon, of seeing what's going on, and you want to do it at a reasonable cost.
Mm-hmm.
If you fly really expensive planes overhead, that costs an awful lot. Whereas if
Yeah.
you sail a relatively inexpensive sail drone through the ocean, you get a lot of detailed pictures, and you get it for a year at a time. So
Yeah.
long answer, but I think the trends are in a good direction in my view.
Yeah. And I think, military cooperation is one of the hardest things that two countries can achieve
Hmm.
because they
It
are super
requires,
sensitive and
yes, super sensitive, requires a lot of trust. And Vietnam has kind of a unique defense and foreign policy.
yeah.
It's defined in part by what they refer to as the four no's. No military alliances, no aligning with one country against another,
Yeah,
no allowing third countries to station military bases or troops on Vietnamese soil,
soil.
and
Yeah.
no resorting to the threat or use of force.
Yes.
And that has been a consistent policy for decades. So we're not, the United States isn't looking for an alliance with Vietnam, and Vietnam is not looking for an alliance with us. But a powerful partnership, that's another matter, and that's achievable.
Yeah. And one, big example is uh Deputy Minister of Defense Nguyễn Trường Thắng. He's the current
Yes.
Deputy Minister. And he's been like working really hard on foreign relations. He's been traveling to defense expos and exploring new opportunities for Vietnam to expand its military capabilities. So,
It's a
uh,
modern, much more modern, outward-looking military than it used to be.
yes,
So, and
yes,
I
yes, yes.
found this in the years I've brought um, members of the defense industry to meet with the Ministry of Defense.
Yeah.
Remarkable transformation over time, much more trust than there was in the past, much more openness, and greater sophistication
Mm,
about what's happening in the world, what developments Vietnam needs to be keeping up with.
hmm. Yeah. Um, Unfortunately, we're almost out of time, but I do have
Okay.
one more
Yeah.
question for you before we end. Um, so looking at both your diplomatic career and your work after government service, what advice would you give to young people who would want to work on US and Vietnam relations or diplomacy more broadly?
Well, I think now is kind of a tough moment to be a diplomat, be honest about it. I can't unreservedly recommend following the route that I took, which was to be a diplomat first, because essentially our diplomatic apparatus has been dismantled. They've laid off anybody in the senior ranks of the State Department has been replaced by loyalists. So we went from having the strongest diplomatic corps in the world and that the world has ever seen to being absolutely hobbled, crippled, just in a remarkably short period of time. So it's the one hope I have is that should things change politically in the United States, well, then there's going to be a lot of responsibility that will be thrust upon new entrants. So I have told young people, well, if you join now, there likely will be a new regime in place by the time you enter the State Department because the whole process takes a while. And so you'll be able to rise fast and be able to get responsibility fast. But let's be honest, it's going to take a long time, if we can ever do it, to rebuild our diplomatic capabilities after the destruction of the past couple of years. It's been absolutely thoughtless, harmful destruction that damages American interests for decades to come. So, what options does that leave? Well, the private sector is as active as ever. The private sector is as engaged as ever. And what I learned when I left government service and went to the private sector is, I worked for Google. A company like Google can bring to bear resources that the public sector cannot.
Mm,
They can mobilize resources to address challenges that are beyond the capability of the public sector. And so it is possible to work for in a U.S. company
mhm,
or an NGO or an academic institution and make a big difference, a big positive difference for the United States and for the world. That was a revelation to me. I thought kind of the only way you could do good in the world was in the public sector. That's not the case. A lot
mhm,
of areas where expertise is needed and valued in academic institutions such as yours, in NGOs and think tanks, and every field you can think of is more international than it used to be. So if you're in the field of health, especially public health, that's an
Right.
international field nowadays. If you're in finance, that's international. If you're in energy, that is international. So you name it. Pursue your passion, pursue the things that make you the most interested, you're most interested in, and use international expertise uh, to to think big about what can be accomplished.
Yeah.
So, I wish I had a brighter picture for those who want to join, would like to be a U.S. diplomat. Other other countries still have strong diplomatic corps because they understand how important it is. But our country seems to have forgotten how important it is. I hope at some point we'll remember.
Oh, thank you so much for joining Policy Chats. It's been a great honor to talk with you, especially this is my last podcast episode. Thank you for making it so memorable. And yeah.
Well, the pleasure is mine. Thank you. Remember, nothing is impossible,
Yes.
especially in U.S.-Vietnam relations. There's nothing we can't do.
Yep.
And I think huge opportunities exist ahead if we can just take advantage of them.
Thank you so much. Hello. Thank you for listening to Policy Chats. I am saddened to announce that I will be leaving my position as the podcast host, and I wanted to share that over the past year, the podcast has truly transformed me. From being a shy student to now a podcast host, where I gain a wealth of experience from our guests and also my mentors. I'm sad that I won't be able to do this job anymore, but I'm also happy that you all get a new podcast host. And I am confident that she will do an amazing job. So sitting right next to me is Ari Chung, who will be our next year podcast host. Ari, how about you tell everyone a bit about yourself?
Hello everyone, my name is Ari Chung, and currently I'm a first-year public policy student at UCR. Dori has left me big shoes for me to fill, and I'm really excited to have more amazing guests on the podcast and also have more people learn about different policies and experiences.
Thank you for listening.